Well, welcome to our Thursday evening Zoom sponsored by Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Please mute yourself during the presentation. And then after the presentation, you'll be able to unmute and ask questions. I'm John Sarver with I'm on the board of Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and many of you are members, and we appreciate that. And if you're not, we would love to have you join us. Which you can do online at our website, glrea.org, glrea.org. I would like to thank some of our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Homeland Solar, McNaught and McKay, Iron Ridge Fracking, and Harvest Solar. And tonight we have David Arnosti and some other gentlemen coming to talk to us about geothermal energy. David is a prof at MSU and biochemistry and molecular biology. And he's also on the board of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, which is a marvelous statewide organization helping communities of faith become more energy efficient and use renewable energy. And as part of that effort, he's helped his own church, Hazlitt Community Church, put in a solar system. He does have a solar system in his house, but tonight he's going to be talking about geothermal, and he's also got Dave Ferguson with him. He'll also share his experiences with geothermal, and Brandon Mahoney from Michigan Energy Services, an installer, who's going to kind of help with the question and answer. So with that, please mute yourself and let me turn it over to you, David.
Thank you very much, John. Linda, I think your mute is not muted, so we're picking up some background from you, but you can find that button. I'm just going to share my slides here. And let's go into presentation mode. So delighted to be here tonight, and this presentation is co-sponsored by the Meridian Energy team. Leroy Harvey heads that group in Meridian Township here near Lansing, and John Sarver, of course, having just done the introduction tonight. And I'm going to just move this little piece over so I can see my slides also. And we'll get started. First of all, thank you all who may be basketball fans. I know that there are some games going on right now. Fortunately, this presentation will be recorded, so I don't want to jinx anybody, but go green, go white. Geothermal heat pumps. Geothermal heat pumps, which is something we'll be talking about today, are something that are familiar or connected to something that's very familiar. So what I'm aiming for today is to give a homeowner's perspective of applying this technology and our personal experience, which is kind of an experiment, and maybe that'll be useful for some of you down the road in your own home situations. So we know about heat pumps in our own homes because we have things like refrigerators, which pump heat from the inside of the fridge out back to those coils. We have air conditioners, which, for instance, pump heat from inside the room to the outside. And those are the same essential technology that we're going to be interacting with the geothermal systems. When people use that word geothermal, it can have a double meaning. So one kind of geothermal energy, such as geyser fields, they really use the boiling hot water, or more than boiling hot temperatures underground to drive generators, but that's not the kind of geothermal we're talking about today. The geothermal that we're talking about today uses the latent heat that's in the ground outside to warm our homes in the wintertime, and it uses the ability of that same soil to take up a lot of heat to cool our house in the summertime. And so I'm just going to share a 2-minute video, just a second, from the Department of Energy, which gives you the basics on that. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Just a moment. It's much easier to demonstrate with the, okay, with a cartoon rather than trying to explain with my hands. Okay. So here we go. Let's see. Sorry about that delay. I've got to share this now.
We all want to save money heating and cooling our house or office, right? The answer may be under your feet, literally. Much of the heating and cooling can come from the ground, below the surface, with something called a geothermal heat pump. You see, below the frost line, about 10 feet down, the Earth maintains a nearly constant temperature of 54 degrees. We can tap into this energy to provide heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. Okay, now here's how it works. Bury a loop of pipes called a heat exchanger just below the surface and fill them with water or a water and antifreeze solution. During the winter months, the air is usually cooler than the temperature below ground. The solution circulates in a loop underground and absorbs the Earth's heat. This heat is brought to the surface and transferred to a heat pump. The heat pump warms the air, and then your regular heating system warms the air some more to a comfortable temperature. Finally, ducts circulate the air to the various rooms. Now, a huge benefit is that the geothermal system doesn't have to work as hard to make people inside comfortably warm, and you save lots of money on your heating bill. In the summertime, the system works in reverse. When it's hot outside, the temperature below the surface is cooler than the summer heat. So the fluid in the loop absorbs heat in the building and sends it underground. The ground's lower temperature cools it, and it's circulated again and again. Now you're saving money on air conditioning. Now, this church uses a large geothermal heat pump to heat and cool the building. It has a very big parking lot, which lets it spread out its loop horizontally. But if you don't have all that space, you can go straight down and use a vertical loop system instead. Geothermal heat pumps can be used just about anywhere in the U.S. because all areas have nearly constant shallow ground temperatures, although systems in different locations will have varying degrees of efficiency and cost savings. The constant temperature of the Earth just below our feet is a sustainable resource, literally in our own backyard. It's a clean energy source ready for us to use to heat and cool our homes and buildings while lowering our utility bills.
Hey, that was our U.S. Department of Energy with a quick explanation of how these technologies work. And I'll carry on for how it actually connects to our own home experience. Okay, so let's see. There we go. These systems have been employed for some time. The technology is not new, decades old. There have been large-scale deployments. Ball State University, for instance, converted from a giant old-fashioned boiler system to just geothermal heat several years ago. It was a large project. Churches, as described in that video, have done this. There are a number of different stories that you can read about, so large facilities, and our own state capitol has quite an extensive geothermal field that they just put in to provide modern HVAC to this old structure, and this involves hundreds of these vertically bored wells. Now, that's all very expensive, although it will save money immediately and provide more environmentally friendly HVAC. What about homes, a homeowner? For a house, for instance. And there are homeowners in our area around Lansing and in Michigan who have already installed geothermal systems Some of them, like the one I'll describe, is a closed loop system. That's the one in our backyard and the one that Dave Ferguson has. Some people have closed loops that are not underground but are in a pond. And sometimes there are systems that are so-called open loop systems where water is pumped through from a well and then dumped into a pond. So let's see. Let me, just a moment. Sorry, guys, something happened to the rest of my slideshow. I need to find it. There we go. Okay. So I would like to just briefly introduce our fellow participants here. Dave Ferguson has a home geothermal system. His house is about 2,000 square feet, and he also has a solar system, and he replaced propane heating. Dave is a noted photographer for local sports events as well. Many people know him chiefly through that. In their backyard, they have this ground mount solar system, and the Ferguson house, as he noted from 2020, about half of the electricity is used in the house for lighting, air conditioning, or not air conditioning, lighting and refrigeration, and somewhat more for geothermal. We can talk about that later. And then Brandon Mahoney is the sales manager and co-owner at Michigan Energy Services, and they're the ones who provided us our own houses facilities. So as John said, I'm a biochemist at MSU. I've been engaged in solar activities through our church, Hazlet Community Church, and a board member at Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. Our house, we put solar panels on the roof about a decade ago. This is a 4 kilowatt system. You can see over the years the annual production of electricity. It's a very standard house. There were lots of houses in our neighborhood that were built identically to this. So I think that one can better guesstimate, how well this would work for a typical standard suburban house of 2,100 square feet. So earlier last year, I sent this picture to Brandon and colleagues. Our house is shown in the middle. And I said, if you could get a truck on that orange line past the side yard, we could put a geothermal field in our backyard. So those X's indicate where the proposed boreholes would go. And sure enough, with suitable discussion and negotiation this fall, this large truck maneuvered around the side of our house, got into the backyard, and here they are, ready to drill 3 boreholes. Boreholes are essentially 4 or 5 inches in diameter, and a plastic tube goes all the way to the bottom and back up again, and then they grout it in with bentonite so that it's not a well. It doesn't allow water to flow up and down. It's really just a solid installation. So the driller left the backyard with some tire tracks and these 3 boreholes. And then Michigan Energy Services team came out and finished the job using an excavator. They trenched down to, I think, 5 feet, tied all the plastic tubing together, brought it right up to our house. You can see they're down here connecting this plastic tubing, and then it goes to these 2 white tubes into our basement. So that allows the liquid to circulate back and forth underground and during the winter time, well below the frost line. Here's the backyard after it was all done. Kind of ripped up the grass, but we can plant new grass on top. So they backfilled the trench and said, let it sit and settle over the winter, which it's doing right now. So at the end of the project, then we had a sign in our front yard. And during periods of winter, when the backyard now looked like on the right-hand side, it's kind of amazing. We were drawing heat out from underground and keeping the house at a very comfortable temperature. This is the actual heat pump. It's from Hydron. The blue arrow at the bottom left shows a black set of tubes. That's where the coolant comes in, or the heat exchange medium comes in from outside. It goes into the heat exchanger, and then the heat is pumped out into the house using the regular ductwork. So we had a gas furnace there. I'm picking up someone else's unmuted background, but you can check yourself. We had a furnace in there. It was only 5 years. It turns out that the parsonage at our church had a 40-year-old furnace that needed urgent replacement. So Michigan Energy Services took our old furnace and put it in there. And so it was recycled in a good way. And it has the same, this new unit has the same footprint as the old furnace, pretty much. We got a new thermostat. That's what it looks like. We noticed immediately that finally the bedroom temperature was about the same as downstairs. We'd always suffered from, it was always freezing cold upstairs because, and being a scientist, we recorded data at least for the first few days and found that the temperature was remarkably stable in the house. So there was some appreciation for a greater comfort. This particular so-called 3-ton unit, a standard size for this size house, comes with a 10-year warranty on the parts. And I think that we can talk to Brandon more about what the typical life expectancy is. In general, when you think about it, the heat exchanger is compressing gas and letting it expand, but there are no high temperature flames burning inside. So it's not as stressed out a kind of unit, and they don't break down as fast as furnaces. You also don't have to worry about carbon monoxide poisoning because it doesn't run on natural gas. You're not burning anything. Another thing about the particular unit, I looked up some stats on this particular heat exchanger. So this one is rated for its efficiency in the air conditioning mode, that would be in the summer, and in the heating efficiency mode. Those are two different sets of scales. So depending on whether it's running at the low setting or the high setting, for air conditioner, it has EER rating of between 21 and 31. And by comparison, the high efficiency air conditioner that it replaced, I think, was 16 or 18. So the higher number is better. So we expect for cooling the house, it should be more efficient than running a regular air conditioner, as people have observed. For the heating efficiency, it has a so-called COP. That's the efficiency, depending on whether it's running high or low, of 4.5 or 5. And Brandon can give us more insight on what those mean and how that compares. But essentially, it's quite an efficient way of heating the house compared to burning gas. Okay, what about the costs? This system cost $39,000 and $39,000 with the 30% tax credit, which was enabled by the IRA legislation last August, and that's good for another decade. So that's something you can count on. Of $11,700, it's the final cost is just over $27,000. So a pretty big upfront cost here. And then what about its performance? So I took a look at, say, the March gas bill, the latest one that just came in. So the top graph shows heating our house with a furnace, and the green bars show the amount of natural gas that's used. And you can see peak was in February, and the blue one was March of 2022. And by comparison, in this year, you can see exactly when we installed the geothermal system. Instead of going up in December, which is partly November, partly December, the gas went down. And now what you're observing with these low bars actually represents the gas water heater. I can talk more about our water heating system, but we're using about 5% of the natural gas that we were before installing it, as expected, because we're not heating with natural gas anymore. And the charges for natural gas now were about $3 in March, plus the hookup fee, which is $13. So gas usage, of course, went down dramatically and drastically, as we'd hoped. And what about the electricity? That I didn't know at all how things would come out. So looking at our electricity use from prior years, this, for instance, is a 2020 shot. We use in our house about 450 kilowatt hours, or about 15 kilowatt hours per day. So 450 per month, something like that. And sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. So that was we knew that the usage of electricity would go up because we're doing all this heat pumping. And so it's interesting to actually see, just looking at the first 3 bills from 2023, it appears that the amount of electricity we're using is about 200 kilowatt hours higher, or about $30. The amount of savings for gas is around $100 or so. So there's definitely a net savings. I'd expected to use a lot more electricity. It could be because we've had a warmer than usual winter, or maybe it's just more efficient than I had thought. But this would be about, well, 450 plus 200 would be less than a 40% increase. And that's during our peak heating months. Looking at the bills, the January, February, March, April bills for 2021, 22, and now 23, it's dropped to almost half. And that includes everything, including the connection fees and the electricity and the residual gas for heating. So it's still early to tell because we haven't gone through a cooling season, but definitely fuel charges, that is power charges, have gone down. Then some dollars and cents calculations. So the system with the 30% tax credit was $27,000. Drilling boreholes straight down is expensive. And I think it's about half of the cost of the system. And Brandon can fill us in on that. But if you have to do vertical wells, that's the most expensive way to go. You can also, if your yard is larger, do a horizontal field, which the Ferguson family has, and that's cheaper to install. I think it's also less disruptive to your lawn. I'm guessing that a new gas furnace would have only been about a third of that, about $9,000. But of course, their lifespan is shorter, and then you're burning gas, and it looks like the energy costs are considerably higher. I'm not sure exactly where our final energy cost savings will land up. I'll have to see after an entire year. And it's also difficult to predict what future costs will be for natural gas and electricity. Another thought is air-to-air heat pumps are also out there on the market. They're essentially glorified air conditioners, and they're cheaper to install, but they have higher running costs and they don't last as long. And then, of course, what's not included in this is the externalized cost of burning fossil fuels, which we know are having disastrous impacts. And what can we do? So it's an idea of what kind of investments are we making now for future generations. So where to find out about contractors? I use this website, earthcomfort.com. I understand that Michigan Energy Services is a member of the association. On this website, they have find a dealer. You can click on it. And so I've shown, if you click on this link, they show more than the ones indicated down here. There are dealers around the state who do geothermal. They also provide a checkoff list to compare the interactions you're having with dealers and are they doing all of their work properly. So I'd like to thank GLREA for sponsoring this opportunity, Meridian Township Energy Team for helping promote energy efficiency and renewables in the local Meridian Township area, and Michigan Energy Services. And I'll stop sharing now, and Dave Ferguson, and Brandon, Mahoney, and I are happy to take questions.
Go ahead, Alec.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. Just out of curiosity, on the coldest days in the winter, did you find that the temperature, the thermostat was able to keep up to its temperature?
Yeah, the question was, what about on very cold days? So almost immediately after it was installed, we had that cold snap. It was down to about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was able to keep the same 65 setting with no problem. And the only thing we noticed is that it was running more of the time. So in general, it tends to run on stage 1. Pretty much that's the lowest setting. And it was just on the stage 2 more of the time, but it was not a problem at all. And the house didn't get uncomfortably cold or anything like that. So that was sort of an immediate acid test.
David, I want to add something for a minute here. This is Dave Ferguson here. First of all, ours is like you said, it's a horizontal thing. They put that horizontal thing in with a ditch witch, and so the only hole in our ground was about a 5-foot wide by 20-foot deep hole out to the side of the house. They did not dig up our yard in any way, shape, or form the same way that yours was dug up. And also, I'd like to say that with respect to part of the question you were answering, David, I think too, is that they told us our furnace that we keep it at a constant temperature because if the temperature increases or decreases more than 3 degrees, then it goes to an electric backup as opposed to using the geothermal system. And so you don't turn your heat down at night, because then if you turn it back up in the morning, it takes a bigger oomph to go. If that helps, I don't know.
Yeah, I would just like to chime in a little bit here. Alec, I appreciate your question. It's a question as a contractor I get quite a bit, do these really work in Michigan, and it really just all goes to the factor of design. If we do our homework behind every project and we do load calculations, we have system sizing software that tells us what type of system we're going to need to handle a house based on certain design criteria. So, for example, when I quoted Dave, I'm guaranteeing the comfort in the house from 70 degrees inside down to -10 outside. So, they're just some of the design parameters we use. And quite honestly, a few years back when we had our polar vortex and we were -18, -20, the systems were performing fine. They're running an awful lot, just like a gas furnace would at those temperatures. But, as long as the homework is done behind it, there is no problem keeping the house warm with geothermal.
Yeah, I should add too that our system was put in 2014. And since that time, we haven't had any problems with the system at all, other than, your annual inspection.
Great.
I see hands up from Hans, Alec, and Ken. So Hans first.
Hi, well, thank you very much. The example you gave, Dave, was of your system is forced air. I'm curious whether these geothermal systems would work with older radiators.
That's an excellent question. That would be a ground to water kind of system. And I'm going to let Brandon, as the tech specialist, pick that one up.
Thank you.
Sure. Typically, geothermal is not associated with baseboard heat or radiator heat. Our water temperatures do not get hot enough to handle those types of heat. So you're typically still looking at a high efficiency boiler. We can do radiant inflow applications with geothermal, no problems. That requires a much lower water temperature than either a baseboard or a radiator style heat.
So I think the issue is the air that comes out of our vents is maybe 95 degrees or 100 degrees, enough to warm things up, but it's not blasting hot. For old-fashioned radiators with hot water inside, you want to get up to like 145 or something like that. And squeezing the heat to that level takes more energy. But I have read about commercial systems that do that. but it may not be so common with residential.
Right.
Alec had his hand up too.
I can buy a new house.
Go
Well,
ahead,
well,
Alec. Alec,
yeah,
go ahead.
Alec.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your estimated time to breaking even on the system is. You know, if you had kept your furnace going with the gas card, what was your estimated 12 years, 1 year for use and then making, not making money, it's like saving a lot more after that.
I couldn't understand because it sounded like Alec's question was breaking up. I think it had to
Okay.
do
Let me-
with,
I'll chat.
yeah, put it in the chat.
I think he's looking for the break-even time.
Oh, break even time. And we don't have enough experience, not enough days. Brandon, tell us about other customers.
Well, I mean, in most cases, you know, once you factor into the federal 30% tax credit right now, you're in the neighborhood of that $10,000, give or take, as a premium to go geothermal versus a new gas system. I always struggle a little bit with the question of payback. First of all, I mean, any heating and cooling system is not an investment, right? We're not putting in a gas furnace or geothermal to make money. So, you know, that's something, you know, it's a difficult question to answer. Just by the fact that it does have a payback period, you know, even if it took 20 years, it's still better than a gas system. If you have an old 80%er and you put a 90%er in, you're probably looking at a 40 to 50 year payback on that. But you need a heating and cooling system. So, but that $10,000 premium that you pay for a geothermal system, I mean, it appears as though, you know, David, just this winter, he's saving, I don't know, was it $400? Was it $400 a month? I believe your numbers were, David?
Yeah, I'm guessing that maybe we'll be saving $600 a year. We have a pretty well insulated house, more than the typical one around here. But I just don't know until we go through the
Right.
whole heating cooling season, what the final numbers are.
The other issue you have is you know, your payback depends on what you're looking at, right? So if you're just looking at when am I going to see the difference back of what I'm paying, that period is fairly long. But when you look at things on a larger scale, let's say 20 years, and you're comparing putting a new gas furnace in an AC in versus a geothermal system in, that geothermal system is going to last you 20 to 25 years. And current research is showing that gas furnaces are lasting about 12 years. So, you know, within a 20-year life cycle, you're going to be buying a new furnace in AC. So, you know, do you factor that into your payback discussion? It's those types of questions that kind of make it muddy waters a little bit. If you look at things on a 20-year predicament, it's a much closer scale than people think it is.
And frankly, I would say a lot of the thinking on my part was, we don't have 20 or 25 years to figure out how we're going to get out of natural gas, how we're going to get out of fossil fuels. I see kids every day at the university who are going to be living into this future that we're creating. And this is one way to cut the umbilical cord to fossil fuels to your house. We do have solar panels, and I'm thinking of putting more on. So long-term,
Yes, well,
for heating of our
no, I don't know.
houses, renewable energy pumping heat in and out is definitely one good solution. And I had this amount of money at the credit union, which up until last year was getting like 0.1% interest. So I said, this is an investment in the future, but I'm not sure how the economists' numbers are going to roll out until we do more. Until we do, you know, well, who knew that there was going to be a war in the Ukraine and the turbulence on the energy markets, those kind of things.
Well, David, our incentive in 2014 was that our propane cost went from $1.67 to $3.29. And there was some question at that point as to whether you were going to be able to get propane. Now, propane costs have dropped back down, but they certainly were. That was why we did this.
Yeah, multiple ones. Let's see, I'm trying to remember who was next. So Ken, we got your question answered, I think. Loren Sargent?
No, you don't.
Oh, okay. Ken Foster, I guess we
If you
have.
don't mind, because I appreciate your experience to this thing. We're solar about a year ago. I did extensive, I'm a PhD engineer in material science. I did extensive calculations on it. It's been the greatest experience. Much better than I thought it would be. We looked at geothermal and we had a lot of great concerns on the energy usage. So my first question to you, I got two, is how much energy a month, I think I heard you say it, are you using additionally because of your geothermal pumps and other accessories?
It looks like our electric bill went from around 450 to around 650 or around 200 kilowatt hours.
That's what I thought I
Per
heard you
month.
say. So that's
About
exciting.
200. Yeah.
Because it turns out, because two things, we put it in, and I've never been measuring my electricity. I never paid any attention to it. We've reduced our energy usage, so we probably have overcapacity today.
Mhm,
Now we have a difficult spot to put bores in. That's a separate conversation, but
mhm.
so that's exciting. I'm kind of happy to hear that. Solar has been really, really good for us. We're trying to do two things: reduce financial costs, which is on my back. My wife's more environmental; she's CO2. Geothermal is very exciting. Last November, I turned away from it. Your story is really interesting. I think I need to go back and look at it for next year. I may not be able to do it in my location, but thank you for sharing your story. That I greatly appreciate it. The second question I really have is, if you were to do it again, would you do it?
Oh, definitely. I think there's no question that from housing comfort and simplicity, the only thing that I didn't anticipate is I would have put a lot more plywood boards down on the grass. So that
That's good advice.
this spring I'm going to be like leveling out where these heavy trucks came in. The neighbors thought we were drilling for water. They had no idea what the heck are they doing at the Arnosti's house. So yes, the but we can grow new grass. I'm not
So do you have an
worried about
HOA?
that. We do not have a homeowners association.
Okay, so we have a very counter environmental homeowner. Okay, that's good to know.
Good.
That's an issue.
David, I want to say that again, we're 8 or 9 years into this, and I would not have, I don't regret anything. The only confusing thing we had is we have DTE energy. And I don't
Me
know
too.
if the other people have this too, but they give you a lower rate of electricity if you put a geothermal system in. However, we have a solar array that we put in after that. And in order to, we had 2 separate meters, and they had to combine it into 1 meter under one charging thing in order to accommodate the solar array. Otherwise, you'd have to have your solar in 2 separate columns or systems or that sort of thing.
All right. Yeah,
So,
I know.
and it all worked out. I think it worked out okay, but it's a complicating factor that you need to be aware of.
So understand, I've been married 28 years, and I want to say married at least another 28. It's all about environmental. If I have 2 arrays and I have to do DTE power for geothermal, my marriage is in challenge. So I've been working very hard.
We did not do
Everything
that.
out of solar.
Just to be,
And that's what I want to do in this case, as much as I can, or with credits.
well, just to be clear that we do have, what we had to do is that we had to put our geothermal system under the regular rate structure, and the solar is offsetting that, as opposed to, because they wouldn't give us credit
Yeah.
from
I
one
agree.
account to another account.
All right. You're ahead of me, as most of you guys are. Thank you very much,
Okay.
all of you. I appreciate this. This is a great session.
Before we go on with Lauren Sargent's question, Pat Dobosinski had a grass bashing comment, which I am totally in sync with. Some of that torn up area I've covered with native plant seeds so that they can scarify, and I cordoned it off and we'll see what comes back. So yes, more native plants. Lauren.
Hi, we put in, well, okay. I've been trying to get off DTE as much as possible, which in Michigan is a huge challenge. We've got maximum rooftop solar, which we got in right before net metering closed. We insulated the heck out of the house. We've got one more little bit to insulate. Then we put in an air source heat pump and a heat pump water heater when our HVAC died. We wanted to do geothermal desperately, but there was absolutely no way to do it. And it was Michigan Energy Services who did our heat pump. And I mean, they were even so creative as to suggest maybe we could temporarily do an open source geothermal system using city water until they could try to come up with something that would involve ripping up our driveway and so forth. So my question is for down the road for future proofing, and I guess this is more a question for Brandon, do you foresee anybody coming up with some of the smaller scale drilling rigs to get into tight lots like ours, into anything like networked geothermal in the public right of way so that multiple homes could connect to a shared ground loop, anything like that coming down the road when our air source heat pump gives up the ghost?
Hey, Lauren, good to hear you again.
Oh, and by the way, I just want to make people be sad about air source heat pumps because our usage last month was 1,260 kilowatt hours, which we only offset with 340 kilowatt hours of solar. And part of that usage is not just the air source heat pump, but the heat pump water heater and an EV. So
there are a lot of exciting things happening with community systems. There are several, I should say, companies now that are offering, I want to say, financing for the loop systems, if you will. So there's a project getting ready to kick off in Ann Arbor called Viridian, where there is an organization that is funding the loop systems, and then there'll just be a monthly fee on everybody's basically utility bill or HOA fee, however they choose to do that. Because as Dave mentioned, vertical drilling was about half of his cost. So if you could eliminate that portion of it, geothermal becomes very affordable. So that's a great option for us. I'm hoping that there's more companies like that in the future. I've even heard of some projects, they're considering, I've heard rumors of, like in Ann Arbor, for example, when it comes time to repave the street, let's tear up the road, let's put geothermal loop systems under the road and then cover it up, and then everybody on the road can tap into geothermal. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. So we are hoping things go that way for sure. What was your other question, Lauren? There was another question.
Well,
there.
because I'm a huge fan of network geothermal, what I like to call power parity, because it's the outside part that's the expensive part. The inside isn't much different from just
Right.
replacing your HVAC with another one, and that's when we really can make the big transition, is when it's affordable for people to do what we've been doing all along, and it's not a scary new technology. But just, it was about, if anybody's doing this network geothermal in Massachusetts, there's an outfit called HEAT, HEET. I don't remember what that stands for, but they've actually partnered now with two gas utilities, Eversource and National Grid, because the pipeline workers looked at the technology and said, this is what's going to save our jobs, because it's the exact same technology, the same pipe, just a different diameter, that's used in these networked geosystems as gas pipeline systems. And they see the end of fossil fuel coming, and it can't come soon enough. But I was just hoping there might be something new and exciting happening around here. That's all. So.
I know that you also asked about well rigs. There are smaller well rigs available, but they're somewhat specialized and extremely expensive. So vertical loops have to become much more prevalent as part of a well driller's combination of work to pay for it. They're currently, they use the same rig to do water wells and geothermal wells. So it's fairly economical. They can keep that rig drilling, 7 days a week if they wanted to, between water wells and geothermal. If they have a rig that's just dedicated to geothermal wells, it's potentially going to sit for some time. And it's from what I understand, an extremely expensive endeavor to look at one of those rigs. So I think that's why we don't see them as much as we should. But groups like this, if we can push more geothermal down the pipeline, it'll make a much more wiser investment for some of the well drillers, I believe.
And Will Paddock.
Thanks so much, guys. So I'll just preface this by saying that we are in the midst of trying to install solar and geosystem. So I love hearing about your experiences. I have a couple questions. One question is regarding how often you see your backup systems come on. And I think, David, you said you have electric backup. Or no, I'm sorry, Dave said he had electric backup. David, did you keep a natural gas backup, or do you have?
It's not really a backup, I don't think, on ours. Maybe Brandon knows how it is. It's not a separate system at all. It just sort of uses.
Right, but it only kicks on. It only kicks on under certain conditions.
Ours only kicks on apparently if the difference in temperature. If you want to raise the temperature more than 3 degrees, it'll go to electric.
Yeah, we also have a resistance heater built into this thing. I think it's on a 30 amp circuit. It's essentially a toaster oven.
Yeah, I
And
think that's what ours is too.
The first week we had it, of course, I was looking at it and I was saying, this is turning on all the time, way too much. And MES sent out a technician and they changed it so it wasn't so sensitive. And since then it hasn't turned on at all.
Yeah, I don't think ours comes on at all.
Yeah, we do a 1 degree setback just because we like it a little bit cooler at night. And that 1 degree setback doesn't seem to freak out the system. So it's doing the heat pump, not the toaster oven thing.
Right.
I really don't see a point of having the toaster oven feature. We've not needed the expertise.
I believe they all. Oh, so go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just going to say that, when we design a system, we call that the balance point. The balance point is the outdoor temperature at which we'd normally expect to see some auxiliary heat. And we want to control that. So if we can keep that to 10 degrees or less outside, it's only 1 to 2% of the total heating load for a season. So, in most cases of systems, I think everybody's systems and softwares and programs all have a little bit of fudge factor built into them. So, for David's house, for example, if the balance point was showing that, we'd expected to see at 7, it might not be till 0 outside. He keeps his house a bit cooler than a lot of folks do. So, I'm glad to hear that it's maintaining. But having a little bit of strip heat use is not a bad thing. If we control it and we design it to be controlled.
The reason I'm asking about that is that I've been trying to estimate what our electricity usage will be from switching to the geo, because we're also installing solar, and I'd like to size my solar panel system to accommodate the total electricity use. So that's kind of why I've been trying to work with some online calculators, and it's a little tricky because you don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of factors, what temperature you set at and all that. But
did your geothermal contractor that you're looking at do manual J load calculations?
I should probably know the answer to that.
Yeah, we had tried to do the same thing. In the meantime, we also bought an electric car. So compared to 2022, we are charging that up, but the electrical use is still considerably lower than the doubling that I was anticipating. So we don't know how many more solar panels we can put on because consumers doesn't want us to overdo it.
Yeah.
Right.
We're on consumers' energy.
The
Yeah,
software
I'm
that
on
we
board.
use,
Oh,
the software that we use that gives us a fairly accurate kilowatt consumption for heating, cooling,
Great.
and hot water.
with that J load calculation.
Manual
Or-
J, that's
Manual J.
that does the load calculations, and then we have a system sizing software that we use that, you know, every manufacturer has their own version of it. So you should be able to get a fairly close estimate on all of your kWh usage for an
Great.
estimated year.
Brandon, maybe you can answer this question related to this too, in terms of our experience. We put the geothermal system in, then we put the solar system in later. We have a Tesla battery as backup, and our geothermal and our electricians said that the geothermal system takes more something than the battery is able to supply, and so the geothermal system is not on the battery backup.
Pretty typical, quite honestly. I mean, it'll run the geo system, but your battery won't last very long.
Well, he said it had something to do with a hard start.
Okay.
Is that, and then our geothermal guy said you can set up your system for, I just don't want people to go out and think that they can do this. Those are questions they should ask.
There are soft start kits available. You know, I mean, everybody's batteries are a little bit different. I guess we have to rely on you know, providing the battery operators and the solar operators, you know, the specification sheets off of whatever equipment is going in, make those determinations. Because every unit has, you know, full run amps, total load amps, you know, all those things, and that obviously plays into that.
Oh, we've got some more questions. Let's see if Andrea can get her question in, and Jim, Dale, and John.
David, we'll
super
have a
fast.
follow-up.
Super fast, because I think I may have more questions. I'd be curious if any of you would be willing to, if I could reach out to you later, maybe, because I know we're running out of time. Is that, if anybody would be willing to chat with me a little more, I'd really appreciate it, because we're right in the middle of this, and I'd love to learn from your experiences. And Brandon, I'm sure you would be happy to get a call. I assume.
I'll put my contact information in the chat box.
I'm
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you so much.
Andrea, your hand's been up a long time.
Hey, David, first of all, I want to say thank you to you and Brandon and everybody who presented. Thank you so much. It was a great information. As of your lawn, and I think for everybody, I just wanted to remind everyone, clover is a great new grass. If you ever have grass.
Oops. Yeah. Jesus.
It will be valued. So anyway, I mainly wanted to say thank you and remind you to also spread some clover seeds.
Thank you. Jim Woodyard. You're still muted, Jim.
Okay, I got it off now. I just want to react to two things. I built a house in 2006, and I've always been in the energy and energy conservation. And so I decided that I wanted to use geothermal in this house that I was building. And as I shopped around at that time, the coefficient of performance was 4. I understand in terms, David, of your system, it's close to 5. So over the period of time of from 2006, the efficiencies have gone up on these systems. And there was a question about lot size and, you know, what you need to do this. I have a horizontal field. I have a lot that's about 60 by 160. And I wanted to see if I could put a geothermal system in, and whether it would meet the needs of us. And so I would say that's been a success, that in fact, with a lot that size, it is possible to go geothermal. So there's no backup system on this. And we have not finished the house yet. Just opened up the second floor on the house since 2006. That's how long it takes me to do projects. And so the heating bills early on were $50 or $60 a month. So there's a lot of other things we could talk about, but in the interest of time, I just want to assure people that lot size is not a limiting factor. So.
Thank you for that comment, Jim. And I saw Brandon nod his head when you said that the efficiencies have gotten better for these units.
Yeah, absolutely. Every year the manufacturers find a way to get a little bit more efficient, different refrigerants, different combinations of compressors and air coils. So we've seen those numbers. I've been doing this since 2005, and the biggest difference I can tell you is when I'm doing houses, 15 years ago, I can do the same size house that I was doing back then with a smaller piece of equipment now because of efficiencies and capacity improvements. So, which is great for the consumers.
We have time for 2 more questions, Dale and then John Freeman.
So kind of in answering Will Paddock's question about how do you estimate, if you have a gas furnace, you know how much gas you're already using, by the month, and you just make a spreadsheet and add up, every cubic feet of gas has a certain number of therms of energy in it, and a certain number of that equates to kilowatt hours. And so you can see how many kilowatt hours would you use if you were just replacing it directly with resistance electricity, which is what you guys are calling auxiliary heat or backup heat. But a heat pump is going to deliver usually anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5, maybe even units of heat per 1 unit of electricity that's used to run it. So that COP, whatever you might assume for the seasonal COP of your system could be anywhere from like 3 to 4, maybe. That you can estimate how many kilowatt hours of electricity you would end up using. And I did that with our house this past winter. We took out a gas furnace, and I haven't had the heat pump set up yet, but I've been running just on resistance heating, and I have used about as much electricity as I thought I would be using. And I haven't run out of my banked electricity yet. So just to say, you can do that.
John Freeman.
Have there been any studies done about what the impact of installing a geothermal system is on the value of your house on the open market when you're contemplating selling your house? There have been studies done by the Department of Energy in terms of the impact of installing a solar system and whether in fact this increases market value compared to your neighbor in your neighborhood where you may have a comparable size house that doesn't have a solar system. So the question is whether a similar studies have been done to show whether in fact by investing in a geothermal heat pump system that you'll get your investment back when you sell your house versus a neighbor who is selling a house and they have a traditional, natural gas heating system.
That's short answer is no. I don't believe any of those studies have been completed yet. Our company has talked to several townships and had inspectors call us and assessors call us, to try to gather. In full disclosure and honesty, I don't see a lot of assessors that even really know what geothermal is, and home inspectors. They're calling us to say, what is this? How does it work? And
it's the same thing with solar. I mean,
Yeah.
the realtors, they're behind the times, but
Yep.
it's
Our realtor told us that it wouldn't increase the value of our house proportionally, but it would make the house sell quicker. That's what she told us. I mean, but that's not a study, but that's just her.
right.
I think
One quick
that's-
follow-up
I think
question.
that's changing, though. I think that philosophy is changing. I mean, you look at the number of people that are participating in this group tonight.
Does the solar does not increase your assessed value, but I don't know if geothermal does or not.
It does. Solar definitely increases your assessed value of your home. That's what the Department of Energy have done. They've done studies in California, Arizona, Colorado that show it does in fact increase the value of your home.
No, assessed value for tax purposes.
The tax purposes. That was the whole point of the Michigan law, which says that when you put on the solar panels, they can't automatically raise your property taxes.
No, I understand that, but the studies have also proven that when you in fact sell your house, the market will value a house with solar higher than a house without solar. And it makes some sense because obviously your electrical bill is dramatically lower. And then if whatever portion of the solar system that hasn't been paid off by the investment, obviously the person buying the house is able to buy it with a mortgage, which is the lowest cost in financing. quick follow-up question for Brandon. Do you know if there's any state laws that prohibit the network geothermal that you talked about a little bit?
I do not believe there are any state laws. It's more municipalities, homeowner associations, you'll run into issues with those types of things. I'm not aware of any state issues that would prevent that.
Okay. Thank you very
Brandon,
much.
do you know of examples of municipal geothermal systems anywhere, Michigan?
Well,
or
the city of Wyandotte was proposing, I don't know how far they've gotten into it, but the city of Wyandotte has their own utility. They provide their own utility. So they were doing some network utilities in terms of geothermal and putting geothermal in, and you would basically tap into it like water. You know, there'd be a box and there'd be a valve out there and you just tap into the water system, like geosystem, like you would tapping into city water. And then there was a monthly fee for that on the utility bill that they sent. I think that program kind of fell apart. I believe the loop contractor they were using, I'm not sure, either stopped doing the loops or something, but that was a program that was gaining a lot of traction a few years back.
But it's conceivable that a city that's progressive, they could float a millage, and the millage could pay for the installation of these, you know, these loops along the public right of ways, and then houses could then tap into it that want to tap into it. So if there are no state barriers, then, you know, cities can get pretty creative in terms of how to finance it.
I think, you know, I've got 8:02, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up so that, you know, I'd like to thank David and Dave and Brandon for a very interesting presentation. Thanks for everybody to participate. And, you know, I guess, you know, we'll let Lauren have the very last question. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what John said. If the city forms a municipal utility, it doesn't have to use millage financing. It can bond for the stuff and borrow at half the rates that that investor-owned utilities do. That's the cheapest way to do it and make it available then to everyone at a reasonable rate.
Sounds right, Lauren.
Yeah, and you know, there's been a number of cities that have had district heating systems. Lansing has one and St. Paul has one. So it's not unheard of for a municipal utility to kind of get into that business. Of course, district heating systems were, you know, hot water typically, or steam, and a lot of times fossil fuel was providing the heat. But there's no reason why you can't do it with geothermal. So again, David, Dave and Brandon, thank you very much. And next week, we're going to take a week off, so there won't be a Zoom meeting on next Thursday, but we'll pick up again the first week in April with an Ann Arbor solar story. I hope you can join us back then. And thanks again. Thanks, David.
Yep.
Bye-bye.